Don't get in your head of this disability of what they can't do. I think that is probably the worst mindset.
Welcome to Love as a Classroom Stories of Inclusion, a podcast about creating high quality, meaningful, inclusive experiences for children with and without disabilities. In each series, I share the stories of teams that come together through love to create high quality, meaningful, inclusive experiences for children and families. In episode 1 of this series, we met Brooke Walker, the mother of Navee Walker, who is deaf. She shared the experience she and the Walker family had since adopting Navee at 4.5 years old. She talked about the incredible experiences Navee had in public school and the value of inclusion. She also voiced a concern for aspects of instruction and teaching that does not meet Navee's needs. Subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss episode 3 with Navee's first grade teacher, Miss Anderson, episode 4 with Wendy Bowman, the interpreter, and 5 with Navee. This episode 2, I'm here with
Onofre. In the South, I go by Miss Onofre. I have been teaching kindergarten now for almost 13 years, and I teach at an all kindergarten school. And kindergarten's the life I know and the life that I love.
Miss Onofre knew the Walker family before Navee entered either of their lives. She was Navee's brother's teacher. Here's her telling of the story.
It was February. I had gotten called into my principal's office, and she said, "The Walkers." And I was like, "Yes." And she said, "They're coming, and you all have already established a relationship with the family. And how would you feel about having Bobby in your classroom?" And of course, my heart saying, "Yes, yes, 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 I'll do it." Then my brain was like, "Oh man." Huh. And I told her, I was like, my immediate response and answer to that is yes, I'll do it. I want to do it. But let me think on it. Can I do that? And I was like, can I come back to you? Let me process this. She was, "Yeah, absolutely." And I asked if there was other potential candidates to be her teacher. We're an all kindergarten classroom. So there's all these classrooms that she could go into. But she said, "I think you would be a really good fit for her. Not only do you have the relationship established with the family, but I think you'd be really good for that." Of course, I was flattered. I was honored that she would think of me in that regard. But I'm thinking, I'm not taking in the family. I love the family. We're not going to hang out. This is not, "Hey, can you babysit my baby?" Or, "Do you want to meet her?" "Do you want to be her teacher? Can you be her teacher?" So, of course, I think of my students already that I've had after the school year. And I'm thinking about their dynamic. And I thought, you know what? These kids are amazing. They're going to welcome her with open arms because we've established that classroom environment. We've established that classroom family. And my sister, she's my right hand. She knows everything leading up to this. "Hey, look, the opportunity has presented itself. It's here. It's literally sitting on my principal's desk. What do I do?" And she's like, "What do you mean? What do you do? You said all along you wanted to have her. If she came to kindergarten in your school system, you wanted to have her." Like, "Okay, you think I can do this?" And she's, "Yeah, you can do this. You've got this." So it's like the push that I needed, just somebody outside of my head saying, "You can do this." And I was like, "Hey," I was like, "She's going to need a lot. She's going to need a lot. And I'm going to need to learn a lot fast. I need to learn ASL like yesterday." And she's like, "You don't have to learn it. You just got to love her." "Okay, but I need to learn it too." Because again, inclusion, you think who you're about to welcome into your classroom, you have to embrace that too. Whether it's deaf, whether it's autism, whether it's Down syndrome, whether it's CP, you have to embrace that. You have to wrap your head around what that means for that child, what that disability means. So I'm thinking, how am I going to teach her? That is essential in learning. And so I went back to my principal and I said, "Yeah, I can do it. I'll do it. But what are we going to need? When are we going to sit down and talk about how this is going to work?" That's called an IEP meeting. You have to sit down and have that meeting and talk about where the child is. Normally, you get a new student, they start the next day and you hit the floor running. You get their grades, you can do an initial assessment to see where they are academically. This is a whole nother ball game we're playing over here with Naughty. So I was like, I need to know where she's at. I need to know, like, academically, where are we? How am I going to provide instruction for her? I don't know ASL. The Walkers are some of the most proactive people that I have ever had the pleasure of meeting. They have their ducks in a row. They know what their children need and they're ready to advocate for their children. And I just get to be a part of that team. So I'm like, yeah, we're going to do this. So this takes a lot of also communicating outside of the classroom. Hey, I'm excited that I'm going to be your teacher. Fill me in. What am I getting myself into? What's about to happen? And they share her personality, what she's like, what her experience has been like at the School of Deaf and Blind. And I'm thinking, that's a School of Deaf and Blind. This is public school. She's gone from bells and whistles over here to this is public school. Her teacher does not know ASL. I was not equipped with the knowledge of teaching a child who is deaf. I kept on like my principal, my ed teacher, like, what are you doing? What are you doing? We were not equipped. We were not prepared for this. When I say we, I mean myself, my principal included, my sped teacher director, she was not prepared. So we're all researching and figuring out what are we going to need. My thought is like, I can't wait on them to figure it out. I gotta get in my classroom and figure it out for myself. So I'm searching and researching ASL posters, ASL cards, ASL picture cards for my students and for Navee, but for myself also. So I'm sticking ASL color picture cards on my color word wall. I'm like, we've got to get this up there. And then I'm thinking, one of the biggest things is my students. I have to prepare my students for this. We all come to the rug and we talk. And I lay it down on my students and said, guys, we're going to get a new student. And they're all excited.
Inclusion takes a lot of thought and consideration. It sounds like despite all your time teaching and the relationship you had with the Walkers, you felt you weren't exactly prepared for inclusion or the inclusion of a child who's deaf. What is inclusion to you, and what were you aiming for when you were planning to expand your classroom community?
Inclusion, I don't think, is necessarily just a child with a disability. I think inclusion is my students cohabitating as a family in our classroom, regardless of gender, race. That's where inclusion starts. Then we throw in our sugar and spice if there's somebody with a behavior problem, if there's somebody with an ID, if there's somebody who has some kind of medical need. Are each of those children labeled boy, girl, Caucasian, Hispanic, Asian, French Creole, deaf, Down syndrome? No, they're not. It's all for one for all in this classroom. It is very strategically placed in this classroom. So I'm going to have a good mix of boy girls at tables and centers. I'm going to have a good mix of academic high ability to academic low ability so that they would themselves provide support, because I can delegate, but I cannot micromanage every child in my room while also teaching. The framework starts with how you set it up. So you have to cue in on your student's personality and know these are a good fit to be together, or I need to have these at polar opposites. So inclusion is embracing. So we have to embrace our little family in here, no matter if it's on a good day or a bad day.
I have a friend who says inclusion starts with the heart set before the mindset and the mindset before the skill set. And I think that's reflected in the idea of this creating a framework unique to each classroom that you talk about, and one that changes from day to day. This seems like the heart set and the mindset, and they're deeply rooted in experiences that occurred long before Navee joined the classroom, or even before you joined a classroom. What have been the biggest influences on your understanding of inclusion?
I guess I had really good professors in college. Maybe the teachers that I had, I was different. My skin color was different. I didn't speak the same language as other kids in kindergarten. I had to learn it. I did have educators who were like, you are part of us. I guess growing up in that, it starts like that. And my home life, maybe the morals that were instilled in me as a child, my upbringing, I think has a lot to do with that. I give credit to my mom. Being brought up that way, it just falls back to, you have to do what's right. We see lots of poverty. And with that, believe it trickles into your inclusion ability.
Hmm.
You get so many students that are unidentified when they walk through your classroom doors. We say we want them to be ready for first grade, but there's so much emotional social growth that has to be put in there because it's lacking coming into kindergarten pre-K. I went through this school system, so I was one of those low income students. I was the one who qualified for free and reduced lunch. I live in a home with two other families that were directly related to us. So I know what coming from poverty was into the school system. So that equipped me, but also seeing my students coming in with no IEPs, etc., it helped me be prepared.
I think that personal connection to a student or family's experiences are really important, and understanding the layers of their stories that go beyond a typical teacher-parent-student relationship. And as a college instructor personally, I often wonder how I can better prepare teachers to see and value the uniqueness of each child and family, and how to embed that into their classroom community in a meaningful way. How, or I suppose, did you have any professors in college or during professional developments that helped you prepare for inclusion, especially the inclusion of Navee?
Just feeling really transparent and raw, no. Through college, you take a course. Inclusion is hard. It's a challenge. Opening your classroom to a child that has an IEP, you go through all these. What do I need? What do I do? Was I prepared for a student that was deaf? Absolutely not. I've had students who have IEPs, anything from Down syndrome, CP, autism, you name it. We already come into it with the mindset of inclusion. But as far as welcoming a student who was deaf, my exposure to that might have been an interest in sign language. Just the exposure of television, that's it. My preparation in that was in my heart. Your heart has to be in it under 10%.
Absolutely. The heart is essential. I don't think that can be taught. It's only learned through experiences with inclusion, in my opinion. But as you know, inclusion is hard without the right support. And I think it's easy for teachers to get frustrated without the right support. You have the heart set and the mindset, but for the skill set, I think you need that support. How were you supported in your school or district so that you could apply the skill set?
The support starts with yourself. You have to be able to stand on your own, and you have to be able to fight that fight for yourself, for your sanity, for your classroom environment, for your classroom atmosphere, one. And if you're afraid to ask, then you better be ready to carry all that weight and all that burden yourself. You have to advocate for those students because they deserve it. They need the support, not just me, the teacher, but those students. And my classroom is not going to function if I can't help that child function. Again, I was not prepared for a deaf student, but you go to your administrator and you say, this is what's up and this is what we need. And then, of course, we have a special education department. We have our own special education teacher here, and she organizes all the stuff. She takes care of the IEP. She takes care of the paperwork, of all the legalities. And then our admin makes the phone calls that we, the teachers, have to follow up on the paperwork. We, the teachers, have to follow up on making sure that call was made. Did you hear back from that call? So while we do have support, everyone has their own to-do list. So just because I need something, I don't get to just go place it in their lap and hope that they follow through on it. I have to go and knock on doors and make sure that they did follow up on what I need, which is what the student needs. It's a whole team. It's a process.
And when the team isn't working together, I know cooperation can be really difficult, especially if upper admin is required. What do you do if you don't have the support?
If there's an IEP in place, legally we have to. Whoever we need to call, that state level, federal level, we're breaking the law, so we better get the resources.
Do you feel like the laws support inclusion, the inclusion of the child with Down syndrome, the inclusion of Navee? Because a lot of times the laws are very vague and they don't really say inclusion. They say we need to serve the child, and the district gets to say, okay, we're going to do that through inclusion. and the teacher says, I can do that. Do you feel like the law isn't necessarily enough?
Absolutely. You said it perfectly. The law says will provide this service. Doesn't say how, doesn't say where. So if it's not optimal for that child to be in a general ed classroom, if it's easier to put them in a AAA classroom, a lot of times that's what happens. And then your opportunity for inclusion is taken away unless you fight for inclusion, unless you say no, I can provide it within the four walls of a general ed classroom.
I wish more teachers would advocate and would say, we can do this. Do you think that the relationships with district staff had a hand in you saying, we can make this work for Navee Walker?
I feel that our special ed coordinator and myself, prior to Navee, had a pretty good relationship where I had a child that was on her caseload, if you will, of students with special needs. And she came to me and was like, hey, how would you feel about having this child? And I told her very flat out blank, I said, look, I will gladly take that child, but their aide, their helper, the person that's supposed to come and check on them is going to have to come religiously, because if that's what that child needs, then that's what that child's going to get. I don't have time to go hunt somebody down to come do their job, but if I have to, you're not asking for a handout. You're not asking for a favor. You have to be okay with asking for what your student deserves. You have to be comfortable in advocating for them for your sake as a teacher. Yes, you went into the profession because there's a love for teaching. There's a love for learning. There's a love for children. And that doesn't come with a cap of only these children, only teaching this subject, or only teaching this lesson. You have to step outside of your comfort zone, and you have to be okay doing that. I'm thinking, how do I explain what death is to these children who are not my children? They're going to go home and say, Mom, we have a kid in my class who can't hear. They're not going to know what that means, like, unless they are deaf. So I explained to them, they can't hear. That is what being deaf means. They cannot hear. And then it's like, how is she going to hear us? And how are we going to talk to her? And it's a whole can of worms. And it's literally like a table discussion between myself and 19, 5 and 6-year-olds. And it's, she can't hear. And just like when you started school, she's probably going to be scared and nervous. But the difference was you could hear me, and she's not going to be able to hear you or myself. So we're going to have to help her feel welcome. We're going to have to help her feel safe. We're going to have to help her feel that this is our classroom and we want her here. And the group that I had, they were a close bunch. They were just sweet kids. They were welcoming, and they were like, okay. And then they got past the she can't hear part. Where's she going to sit? Because she sit beside me. Where are we going to hang up her backpack? So already I was like, hey, there's acceptance there. Let's take it and let's run with it. You always have to cue in on your students' personality. So when I said, hey, would you feel comfortable with Navee sitting here beside you and you could help her? She said, yeah, she can sit here. And then it was, whose center group is she going to be in? You can't lay all that responsibility on one student. So it's, okay, I've got this other one that's really shy, but they're very capable. So I'm thinking, how is Navee going to be good for this student? This student's going to feel needed to help her. So that's going to bring this student out of his shyness. Okay, she's going to be in your center, and I'm going to count on you to show her how it works, how we do things. As a teacher, you have to know your students, know the classroom environment you created, to know where that little puzzle piece is going to fit in. So she came, and it was quite the experiment figuring it out. And then you hear she's going to have a full-time interpreter. And I'm in a smaller classroom. I'm thinking I have to share this classroom with 20 students plus another full-grown adult. And then I'm thinking, what if she and I don't jive? I'm like, God, please let us get along. Okay, so this interpreter, she is Navee's voice. She is Navi's way of communicating with all those around her because, of course, we don't all know ISL. I'm still the teacher. They are still the students. Navi's still a student. This interpreter, she is the facilitator for myself and for my students. I think she's also part of this game now. So I find her a spot. Like, I have a desk, I have a table. She's not going to be in one spot. She's going to be everywhere Navi is. And of course, these are my expectations of what her interpreter was going to be. So I was like, I'm going to get her a good, comfortable rolly chair. Because I know the toll it takes on bending over a student's work, and I was like, that way she can roll wherever she needs to, and I need her to have access to Navi when she's in front at whole group instruction. I need her to have visual access to her when she's at small group. So I need to put her at the end of this table when she comes to my small group table, because just like every other student, I'm going to pull her to my table and she's going to do small group instruction with me. Just like every other student, she's going to come to the rug and she's going to participate in whole group instruction. May not be with a voice, but when we go through letter names and sounds, she has to know letter names. So when we're going, hey, she's going to learn letters. These are letters. We're saying letters. And she's going to go through that alphabet. She's got to build fluency, maybe not saying it, but she's got to build fluency in signing it. So I'm thinking, as a teacher, my gen ed students have to build fluency verbally. My student who is deaf has to build fluency. So yeah, my brain would like learn all the things, teach all the things to everyone, but how they need it.
I like the word access that you mentioned. I know a lot of people talk about differentiation and learning styles, accommodations, but I think that at the core is access. I like to think of it as access points. There needs to be different access points for children, especially ones with sensory support needs like Navee. How do you design instruction and create multiple access points?
I use technology in my classroom. So I had to really vamp up my visual because that's how she learns. In my teaching, I also, just in kindergarten generally, you try to target all learning ability. What kind of learning is going to be best for each student? So I pull it all in. We may sing, we may dance, we may sit and build letters, we may sit and trace letters, we may talk about letters. I repeat it over and over. With Navee, those were different because I couldn't really key in on the auditory aspect. So I really had to up my game. I just had to find a way for it to all blend and make sense, so that my focus was not on just one student, but it was on my class as a whole. It is very easy to say, Wendy, you're here. Take the lead, teacher, but I'm teaching her. But that's not her role. That's not her job. Her job is an interpreter. She's the facilitator. She's not the teacher. She's not the general classroom teacher. That falls back on me. It took a lot of collaboration between Wendy and myself. She would say, you're teaching them in like this. For a child who is deaf, you don't do all of the verbiage. If we're going to say, we're going to read, you do this, like this is the sign for reading. If we're going to count, if we're going to do letters, like, hey, give me all those must-know signs now. Because when I say come, sit, I need her to be looking at me, not at you. Because she's going to learn it from me. You can stand behind me and sign it all to her, but she needs to see what I'm putting in front of her for her to learn. Because I still have these other 19 that I've got to teach. And while I'm learning this new way to teach this one student, I'm incorporating it with all my students. And in turn, they're learning it too, so they can also teach my one student. It's a beautiful circle if you do it right. We make her all her things, her nameplates. We make her feel one of our own. We give her a place in the classroom. We give her a place on the rug. We give her a table to sit at. She has all the same school supplies everybody else has. We immediately start immersing her with friends. These are your friends. Play, try. Those are probably some of my first signs that I learned. Try, friends. I say, you hit the floor running. You do. You just
Mhm.
do. And that comes with wrapping your head around what that child needs. Aside from feeling included, from feeling welcomed. But for a child, honestly, that's all they need. They need to feel loved. They need to feel included. They need to feel a part of. They need to feel welcomed. Because if you treat them like you're fragile, you stay over there, we don't know how to help you. What's wrong with you? No, that's not how you do it. No, we just, we brought her in and we made her one of our own. That makes me so emotional. Yeah, they were rock stars. They were amazing kids. Immediately, it goes back to the classroom culture. It comes back to the classroom environment. It is what you make it as a teacher. Of course, they play together and they want to sit beside each other and they include each other in the things, but that's just kindergarten friendship. It's inclusion when children don't see them any different, when they want to learn to sign with Navee.
I can't express how much that means to me, to families, to children. It's love. It's being in the present. It's not dwelling on someone's past or someone's future. It's how can we make connections at this moment? Can you talk a little bit about the activities or the events that helped you see those connections?
We have these writing journals at the beginning of the year. It's just a spiral notebook and they just doodle in it and whatever. And for me as a teacher, it's a way to see how their writing is progressing. Of course, age development and it's supposed to change. So we go from the beginning of the year where we can't turn page to page and it's just scribbling in colors and then it starts to turn into circles and lines and those circles and lines start to connect and they're people, they represent things. Then they start to put in letters and they start to write their name. And that's the beginning of the school year, what it looks like. When Navee came in, it was their what we call their big kid journal. It has a space in the top for a picture. And then at the bottom, it has your lines for writing. It was a daily routine for us to write. And she slowly made her way into those journal pages where they would always draw themselves in like their mom or Miss Onofre, I drew you and me, or here we are here, whatever. But then you started to see Navee in the journal. And the first time that I saw Navee in the journal, the little girl said, I drew me and my friends. And also tell me who your friends are. And she drew them very accordingly, hair color, skin color, dresses, pants, etc. But then I always go back to the little green circles over the ears. That's how you knew it was Navee. She had the pigtails because she wore the pigtails to keep her implants like from popping off and running. And they were holding hands. And it in her writing it said, my friend is. And that was the simple sentence. My friend is Navee. My friend is so-and-so. My friend is so. We like to play.
That is wonderful. A true reflection of connection. The fact that children saw Navee for what made her different, yet embraced her as a friend like any other, is just so powerful. It was just so simple. My friend is Navee. My friend is Sandra. Looking back on that year with Navee and her classmates, how did that impact your understanding of inclusion? How has it impacted you as a person? And how can the lessons you've learned help other teachers in a similar manner?
You don't give up. You figure it out. I couldn't hear you. You couldn't hear me. You don't give up. Finishing the year with Navee, having her, I would say, man, oh man, don't drown in what you think is impossible. That little girl in her teeny body lit a fire in me. That I didn't even know needed to be lit. If I loved teaching before, I am infatuated, obsessed with it now. She made me such a better teacher. Her parents made me a better teacher. Wendy made me a better teacher. That whole group, just every group leaves an impact. And if they don't, then you're in the wrong game. you're not doing it for the right reasons. And for my class with Navee, it was not Navee. It was not embracing a deaf student. That was not the big kabam. It was the, man, we can do these things. Yes, having a student who is deaf came with a whole box of unknowns. But I can do that. And children can do that because they're resilient. And it's all about how you handle it. That's going to teach your student how to handle it. Take it one step at a time. Don't be afraid to ask for help. You're not asking for help for a favor to take a load off of you. You're asking for help to do your job the best you can do. Don't look at a child as this fragile little thing that you don't know if you're going to be able to help them. You will. Love them, accept them, motivate them, and that motivates you. You're capable of it. They're capable of it. Don't get in your head of this disability of what they can't do. I think that is probably the worst mindset to going into that type situation, of looking at all the labels of they can't do this, they're going to need that, they can't do the other. Think of the things they can do and how you're going to help them do those things and help them do them better.
Thank you so much for taking the time
Absolutely.
to share your love and your passion with me. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed listening and talking with you.
I love talking about it. So thank you so much. Anytime I can advocate for inclusion, advocate for any student, or advocate for teachers, I'm here.
My conversation with Miss Onofre illuminated the value of creating a classroom where every child is allowed to benefit from inclusion. Navee impacted her classroom, her professional growth, and responsibilities that few in our current education system see as the true cornerstone for a high-quality education for children with and without disabilities. Her work as a leader through advocacy, a school and district that allowed her to be creative and collaborate, cannot go under-recognized. Thank you for listening to Love is a Classroom, Stories of Inclusion. Please subscribe so you don't miss the next episode, future series, and the focused episode on systemic issues touched on in these series. After the completion of this series, I will talk with 2 civil rights lawyers about the legal issues brought up in the first 2 series. Until next episode, choose love, choose inclusion.